We've been working with dendritic cells for over 30 years. Couldn't get those things to do anything. Killed a lot of mice, but we actually saved a couple. But getting to people, not until now. Not until now. And that's, of course, what piqued my interest in your company and what you guys were doing, because it's the first breakthrough I actually saw with dendritic cell therapy. I mean, people had tried it and they said, oh, look, we get a little response. Not much. Didn't know how to do it. And we come to your technology and what you've done in the last, 6 years, 7 years?
Hey everyone, Dr. Matt Halpert here with Immunocine, and we have been meeting with different doctors, oncologists, functional medicine specialists, just people in the realm of cancer, just to pick their brains and see what some of their experiences have been in the world of cancer, especially in the past couple of years as immunotherapy has become such a bigger part of the treatment modalities offered, and paradigms are shifting. And so today we are just honored to be able to speak with Dr. Stephen Noga, who has an extremely impressive resume. You can pretty quickly see that he decided one higher level degree was not enough and has two. So he has both an MD and a PhD, and he's quick to say the PhD came first. So I do view him as a scientist. He spent decades at his school of training, Johns Hopkins, where he was one of the top integrative oncologists in the country. He's also spent time in the industry world working in various clinical trials and with the FDA trying to get other experimental immunotherapy products down the road. So he definitely has been doing this quite a while. And again, I'm honored that he is here and willing to speak with us today. So Dr. Noga, it is a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for making time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And I think I'm going to have you introduce me all the time. How's that?
So, I definitely like to ask this question. You've got the medical backing, you've got the scientific backing, but from your perspective, you definitely have been treating patients for a while. Definitely before immunotherapy became such a big buzzword or opportunity as it is today. How have you seen things change in the past 10 years as we've learned more about the immune system and how it can be used to combat cancer?
So, Matt, I think that maybe my age gives it away a little bit, but certainly when we first started treating cancer, back when NIH was in its infancy, and there really wasn't much of an MD Anderson, uh, we knew we were using very toxic drugs to combat this disease because we had nothing else. And I think in the first decade or so of treating cancer, we were able to have a few successes, but many times it was at the expense of serious side effects. And that also included side effects in the immune system. And yet, data was starting to come in that the immune system was one of the most important players in preventing and actually managing when cancer does occur. But I think this is why in recent decades you've seen a changeover more to targeted therapy, where they're trying to direct the attack very specifically, although they still, of course, have side effects related to these drugs. Finally, and again, I had mentioned MD Anderson earlier, but then I'll mention it again with famous scientists that now are there, including one, that's sitting in front of me. But they actually found out many mechanisms of why or how tumor cells actually shut down the immune system and suppress the immune system. And from there, the PD-1 drugs were developed and moved forward. And I think that ushered in a new era of immunotherapy because of course it was going to happen with drugs first because it's easy. You can design a drug, you can manipulate a drug, you can use conformational change algorithms to actually figure out which drugs are good. But yet we knew that, again, this is very targeted, it's only looking at one aspect. What about the whole immune system? What about it? Well, we slowly are getting at that. This is where CAR T cells then came from. And CAR T cells, which actually direct specific T cells to fight specific diseases, and it's very specific, have had great success, but not for everybody, and certainly not forever. But this gave people an inkling of what's going on. When you look at NK cells, this is the same thing. Yeah, we knew about them. We knew how to cure mice with both CAR T and and lots of cells actually. But yeah, they did a great job with mice, but none of this ever worked. And this is going to get back now to something that I've been looking at and researching at in different levels: dendritic cells. And so the dendritic cells, they identified them. They went, oh, they do something with antigen presentation. Not sure what, but they do something. But of course, in the test tube, they figured out that they actually do prime the immune system. They are the managers of the immune response. And Matt, it's through work like that you've done and your team has done at Baylor and MD Anderson that showed that these cells are the masterminds of how the immune system actually attacks tumors. And it makes sense. It's a primordial system. It's like when we found out sharks have an immune system, and they're some of the earliest invertebrates or vertebrates, I guess, I don't know what they are, that we have. But that was a primitive system, but yet what they found out, this is how you fight viruses. And I know that's originally along the lines of what you were looking at until you had that aha moment. Oh my, I think we can look at this with tumors and see whether they attack tumors. And indeed they do. They do attack tumors. And it doesn't matter what the tumor is. And this is the difference now. Targeted therapy, very specific. CAR T cells, very, very specific. Dendritic cells, not at all. Dendritic cells educate to a specific tumor, but they'll do it to any tumor. And the thing is, we've been working with dendritic cells for over 30 years. Couldn't get those things to do anything. Killed a lot of mice, but we actually saved a couple. But getting to people, not until now. Not until now. And that's, of course, what piqued my interest in your company and what you guys were doing, because it's the first breakthrough I actually saw with dendritic cell therapy. I mean, people had tried it and they said, oh, look, we get a little response. Not much. Didn't know how to do it. And we come to your technology and what you've done in the last, 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah, no, that's what a great history lesson. You should consider going into teaching, maybe. But yeah, no, I mean it's funny, right? There's one. Well, I'll be careful with name dropping, and I don't want to slander or libel anyone, right? But yeah, dendritic cells don't have a great track record, and interestingly, that's even in quote unquote less aggressive, easier to treat cancers such as prostate cancer, where after all is said and done, if if you have a very minimally aggressive prostate cancer that's going to take years to actually take you down, maybe we can buy you 4 more months, which is, I mean, and people are spending $100,000 for that. That's back in the 90s. Meanwhile, we're using dendritic cells correctly, which is what the data show, what the mechanisms show, and we have glioblastoma patients going from an expected 7.5 months to we're approaching 3 years, and they still are fine.
I was totally amazed with that data. I could absolutely see why the FDA wanted to move that forward because there's nothing like it.
I love that we have neurosurgeons going, like what, we don't know what to do. Like, you're not supposed to still be here. And so, and it's not one patient, it's not all patients. I don't know, go overboard, but we
Right,
are
right.
certainly moving the needle. We actually just treated, I'll speak to this. We just treated a prostate cancer patient with castration resistant um, stage 4 prostate cancer. And he's a specialist in this field, actually. And he came to us. We just treated him. His PSA it was rising. It was at 140. It's now, well, I should say before the third round of dendritic cells we gave him, we measured his PSA and it was 0.7. And he and his other doctor are so impressed by this. They
By the
have
way, that's normal. Yeah, the PSA is normal now. Yeah.
yes, PSA, yes, that's
Yeah.
normal,
Yeah.
very low. And now his doctor immediately is trying to invest in the company because he knows he says it doesn't actually matter what happens next. What happened today is not something I ever see. I'm
Yeah.
very excited. How do we jump in on this? And so and again, I always like when we get patients, doctors to go, what just happened? Because unfortunately, they may have learned in school eons ago that dendritic cells are critically important in biology, but clinically irrelevant because no one had used them correctly. So it's an exciting time, and if we can keep pushing this forward, I fully believe this will be a ubiquitous treatment alongside any and all other possible treatments.
Well, yeah, this is the first level, and you have some amazing results. And you mentioned, yeah, is it working for everybody? No, but I had a physician ask me that recently, and I said, let's bring this back into something that I have a lot of experience with, and that's bone marrow transplant. I said, Don Thomas at Seattle, who won the Nobel Prize, when they first figured out that they could use another person's bone marrow to treat a patient, that they had actually totally wiped out with toxic chemotherapy, but they could restore it. Their survival curve for a group of patients that normally had 100% fatality, their survival curve was 10%. And this was a success. Okay. And people forget that. And now, we're running, well, on the average, let's say 60% survival in this area. And Matt, with dendritic cells in a whole different system with solid tumors of all different types, you're hitting that number already.
Yeah,
So, I think that physician was wise. They had the money actually to invest. It's not a bad idea, and they are correct. It's here and now, and it's better than what they had.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're just going to keep optimizing. Like, there's no reason to think we've already reached the pinnacle. But yeah, sometimes we do get patients, and they want, can you guarantee that this will cure me? I mean, something very extreme.
Yeah,
Is there a chemo agent your doctor is suggesting with that guarantee? And if there is, probably should do
use it. Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Uh, people, it's like, well, let's at least compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Like, no, we cannot guarantee that, and we never will. But more likely than not, we can get your immune system working correctly to fight the cancer. And no one has made a good argument to me yet why that would be a bad thing or something you should not do.
Absolutely. Not only just for your cancer, but in general, you need your immune system to be working correctly.
Yep. No, that's for sure. So, um, let me think of another question. Okay, here's another question that'll be chopped in and edited. And I don't know, you may not have an answer for this, or you may not. So, you definitely have come on board, and we're on this call right here. Obviously, you buy into what we're doing and trust us enough to put your face here, right? And that's in part because you have vetted us. You have looked at the publications. You have come down to Cancun to meet the team and see the lab and see that we are doing things correctly and scientifically legitimately. But sure, I'll own up to it's just a little weird that we're in Mexico. And of course, we have clinical trials sites all over the country. We are doing all the quote unquote normal stuff. But I was on the phone earlier today, literally with a patient that could benefit from this. Um, he doesn't have the right cancer for the trial. So how does he get it? And he actually asked that. He knows about the trials. Well, how do I get this? He said, if I don't have the right cancer. And I said, that's exactly why we started Immunocine. The science isn't going to, we have to do the trials. We have to get those stats. We have to prove the point. But the science and the biology are not going to change. It's pretty fundamental and foundational. But yeah, to do it legally, correctly, we could not do it in the States when we started this 5 years ago. And we ended up in Cancun largely around the lab, the existence of the ability to control and make sure the science was done correctly. But since you've been in this and doing it a while, I know you've seen and heard of some pretty crazy things where patients might have told you in the past, I'm going to Mexico to do such and such. And do any stories come to mind of some really interesting or out there things that you have heard in the years that patients have tried to do to fight cancer via some alternative mechanism?
Well, this gets back to the whole thing about why people raise their eyebrows and say Mexico, and I'll tell you, yes, and maybe a lot of us have retired by now, but I think a lot of the medical oncologists remember the early days with a drug called Laetrile. And Laetrile is essentially derived from apricot pits or peach pits, and this drug was purported to have anti-cancer properties. And the FDA said, no, the trouble is with the safety of this drug, you can't tell how much cyanide you're actually getting from this product because that's where the cyanide is, in these pits of these type of fruits. And so it wasn't that available in the US. And of course, right away, that starts a conspiracy theory. Oh, they're keeping us from this drug. So this was ripe for some opportunists in Mexico. And now we're not talking about one center. We might be talking about 30 centers in Mexico to open up Laetrile cancer centers. All right. A lot of those patients didn't do well and had nothing to do with their cancer. A lot of them actually had cyanide poisoning. So that is remembered, things like that. There's also, cases of, some stem cell labs, as they call them, that are out there. I like to call it the fountain of youth labs that think that, they can give a product that's going to make you live, I guess, to 150. I don't know. But yeah. And, by the way, it's not just Mexico. This has showed up in many other countries too. But here's the thing that I didn't even understand rightly is what medical tourism has become for many countries. Uh, it's a destination. A lot of these countries recognize that they can do healthcare at the same level, if not better, than what's offered in the US or even in Europe, and they can offer it at a fraction of the cost. And I think that was missed until maybe 60 Minutes when they did a report on a whole plane load of high executives going to Turkey for hair transplants. They're all men, of course, but they're welcomed there. They go in a really nice hotel. They're treated well. They're transported, and they're seen by somebody who does some of the best transplants in the world. Apparently they do it by number of follicles, and this guy's really good at it. So, but but this opened the door, and I swear I use this sometimes with patients and I said, yeah, a lot of people are having reconstructive surgery in South Africa because the physicians are there, the cost is down, they're treated well, they actually care about them. If anybody has any experience in the US with healthcare, they know that ain't happening here. It just isn't, And so I did have some misgivings until I looked at it, the place. And of course, the first thing I'm going to look at is what hospital they use if something goes wrong or when they need it for a procedure or something. And the AmeriMed hospital they use is actually accredited by the US, by Canada, and Europe. It's fully accredited in this regard. The team is fully accredited. That's one of the things I vetted was, who do they have doing this? All these people are board certified. And I'll tell you what I found, which I didn't really know until I actually went down there, is the level of care and compassion that this team shows for the patients. And that's finally what won over my wife, who happens to be a critical care nurse before she retired, is she was like going, Mexico, really? Until I told her how care is managed there in Cancun, not only for Immunocine, but also over in the hospital, and even how they had their emergency room set up in a way that patients could get immediate care. They didn't have to be shipped 6 floors and 2 blocks down to actually get care for a cardiac emergency or something in that line. So this is incredibly important. And I think, that's what I think people are afraid of is the safety cord, is it going to be there? And it's there. It really is. And I think that trip to Cancun was valuable and because as a scientist, first thing I did was look at Matt's papers, and try to tear them apart. Didn't do well. I found one typo, but other than that, but no, I mean the papers. I understood the science, and of course when I started seeing some of the clinical data, both from Immunocine, but also from the sister company running the clinical trials, it was identical. So, of course, I wanted to help out. This is the new wave, and I find it very upsetting that a lot of academic physicians are against this. And I think it's a lot of prejudice they have from just thinking about, things are being done in Mexico and that, hey, maybe they should lift the hood of their car and see whether their Toyota was made in the US or in Mexico. Because chances are it's made in Mexico. I think things have changed a lot in this regard. And I think it was more important, Matt, that you went and shopped around for a long time to actually try to find the right place to do this. That also wouldn't be a major burden on a patient, which is very important besides being a world class place. And you found it in Cancun, I must say. Uh, and it makes sense. It's a tourist destination. They protect that area. That's number one. And I think that's key. You know, they know how important tourism is to them. Medical tourism is just as important to them. And I think that's what you have. And, you have to consider that Cancun or anywhere else you set up that you're going to do it in Mexico is going to be an isolated, special place. And I think that's important, that they know that, all of Mexico isn't stuff you read in the headlines all the time.
Right. Right. It does get sensationalized. Man, you just hit on so many good things. But I was surprised. So, I do think the US, I mean, maybe I'm a little arrogant too. I mean, I think we lead the world in rigor in regards to executing these FDA clinical trials and making sure. I mean, people, you need the proof. You need to do that. But that maybe justified arrogance does spill over, I think, to, well, we also have the best, let me back up. We have the rigor of the trials and we have the money to have some of the nicest, newest equipment and fancy toys and great looking hospital rooms. But that spills over then to, well, we also have the only doctors that really know medicine or can really care about patients. And that's not true. Turns out cancer in Mexico is, they get the same type of cancer we do here in the States or in Canada or in Europe. And they do. I was also very surprised myself about the lead. It's almost like they're taught to be more compassionate. And I, it's a whole different discussion as to why, but you already know, Immunocine, we don't have a lot of admin. We have a lot of doctors. We're very doctor led. And when patients come with us, they're going to get doctors to talk with and walk them through things and explain things and answer questions. And and most of the patients we get, that's a lie. It's not even most of all the patients we've gotten have really pretty much said the same thing. They're just blown away by the level of investment and care that they get from the doctors. None of them question the doctor or medical credentials of the team. And we've at this point heard a lot of stories. I mean, Steve, I've seen you talk to patients and you are very thorough, you're compassionate, you've got wit, you explain things, but not everyone is like you. And there's a lot of doctors, unfortunately, that can't seem to find 5 minutes to really explain things to their patient.
Well, they're a prisoner of the system now. This is the problem. And this is why I've got away from that is, the hospitals are run by administrators. Now the infusion centers and the cancer centers mostly are run by the hospitals and their administrators. And
Administrators,
it's,
lawyers, uh,
yes,
and then your business people. Like,
that's right. And so there's more worry about filling out the forms and billing at the highest level so they can get reimbursement, not the doctors now, because most doctors now are salaried in these lines, but it's for the hospital to get the best reimbursement. And as such, if this doctor wants any quality of life at all, any time for themselves, they move as fast as they can, and it becomes very impersonal. Honestly, because I used to, it was, and what finally, I mean, if you're going to actually take your time with a patient, you're going to be behind, number one, which is not great because then you start getting the dissatisfiers that show up on health grades because they say, oh, my doctor was 30 minutes late for the appointment, not realizing that maybe the next time it's them that ends up with that longer appointment because they have problems. And the doctor is up to 2 or 3 in the morning then doing his notes for the billing. So they don't think they treat you at the hospital. And it's a bad system. And this is why a lot of oncologists are retiring early also because of this. And so it's a shame. It really is. So, I mean, yeah, there's some dispassionate doctors out there, but I actually blame it also on the system. They're a victim of the system.
that's completely fair. There are oncologists, and I've spoken with some where they will say, just as a tangent to it, they'll say, I know my patient would benefit from medication X, but you know what? We can't prescribe that until we fail A, B, and C,
Yeah,
and they're stuck.
yeah,
And so a lot of it is, unfortunately, yeah, it's the system that is at this point so large and so recalcitrant to movement that it is challenging to just
yeah.
step back and just meet the patient where they are and just do right by them. And so I wish I had a great, and so again, certainly not to denigrate on all these phenomenal doctors we have in the States, but there's a missing component. And honestly, this is me on a pedestal. It's our own fault in many ways.
Yeah, it is.
We're such a litigious society. We sue everyone. I mean, that's the pushback. If you're going to sue everyone at the blink of an eye, the pushback is, well, we better make sure we have all the documentation.
Yeah.
We better focus on the paperwork. And people don't realize the reverberations that come from being frivolous. And I will tell you that doesn't happen as often in other places like Mexico. And I think that does allow the doctors to
I
be more
think you're right.
free. to just be doctors and look, this is what I think is best for you. And I don't know how we get that back or what we have to do there, but I mean, I just spoke. I'll give you two follow-ups. I spoke not too long ago to a mainstream doctor who really wanted to. It was him and his patient, and he did not want his patient to come to us. He wants his patient to do surgery and standard things. And he was really challenging us on a lot of this paperwork stuff on the protocol. And yes, we have protocols. But the questions he was asking were like, well, what's the specific maturation marker release criteria for the dendritic
Oh,
cells?
for goodness sakes.
Need to be at 50% or 60%? And I have answers, but that's not the right question. That is, you and I both know you need these release criteria to qualify them for, like, yes, in a trial, but they're actually kind of irrelevant to whether or not it's going to work for the patient.
True.
We don't know. We don't know if it's a difference. If dendritic cells express CD83 at 60% up or 70% up, does that make a difference? We have actually no real idea. And he asked other questions like that, and it's just like, look, I'll answer your questions, but he was trying to get me, it was a gotcha sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just none of this has any relevance to whether or not this might biologically help this patient. You are trying to show how smart you are and how much you know about the system. And these questions are not even scientifically all that they may sound smart to others. They do not, to anyone in the field, these were really poor questions.
And since I'm an oncologist, if I'm dealing with somebody like this, I can actually say to them, hey, you know what we're talking about here? We're talking about a patient, for the most part, with stage 4, inoperable, incurable cancer, who has had several therapies already and is also showing the side effects from these therapies and is on the verge of getting some of those same therapies back that caused all the issues to begin with because you have nothing else. And you're actually asking questions about, release criteria and all this. Let's think about this patient for a minute. Yeah. I mean, I can get away with that, but yeah.
No, it was he ultimately decided that, let's go with the surgery because the 4 days of Neulasta, that has side effects, that has risks. And I thought, I mean, relatively speaking, I guess so. But relatively speaking, that is a really weak deciding point, and last I checked, surgery and removal of organs may also.
Yeah, I think that has a slight risk.
It was not, and I'll tell you what, let me tell you another phone call. I just got off the phone with a patient with, originally it was collecting duct carcinoma. They honestly, stage 4, they really weren't sure. Honestly, it was one of those kind of unknown origin cancers by the time he got to us. They weren't sure. We treated him. We treated him September of 23. And now he's cancer free. All his markers are great. He looks fabulous. He looks so much healthier than he did when we treated him. When we treated him, he looked, I don't know, I think he weighed 140. And I just thought he was just a real skinny guy. And I actually then met with him about 7 months later, and I did not recognize him at first. I was like, I mean, dude, you look thicker, you look healthier. Like, I just didn't even picture him. And now I just saw him again. And now it's, of course, been it's May 25. So this is a year and a half or whatever. Yeah. And his hair is all grown back from he just looks.
And that wasn't from us, by the way, right? We got the hair was us.
I don't know. Dude,
no, I mean, he lost it from the chemotherapy. Yeah.
No. Yeah. He lost it from the chemotherapy, but his hair, he just looks so young and healthy. Yeah. Where did you find the fountain of youth? He looks better than I do. And he's got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old. He's talking about,
fantastic.
He's like, yeah, I'm outside playing with them instead of just on the couch. He just, he's doing great. And it's just, you know what? He could care less what the release criteria were of the dendritic cells. It's worked. And he, instead of succumbing to stage 4, we'll call it collecting duct or RCC, renal cell, but he at least right now would appear to be
Um,
in good shape.
I actually formed with a group of colleagues 2 cell therapy foundations. The one that still exists, International Society for Cell Therapy. We were the first ones to go in there when the FDA was thinking about regulating cell therapy. And we thought, you know what? It's sometimes better to know your enemy and work with them than to fight them or oppose them. And so we worked with the FDA in developing some of these criteria. And you are absolutely right. And I'll tell you, the FDA was sitting right with us. They're like, okay, so we need to have release criteria. And you know, we go, what numbers should we put down here? And the FDA was like, well, what do you think is reasonable? And what they meant was, what are you actually going to know that it's probably really bad if you get under there because something must have happened, like, the freezer thawed out or something. And we go, well, 60% should be a good number. And they went, okay, let's put it down. And I'm being serious. I mean, this is how we started. Of course, things have gotten a lot more sophisticated, but I don't. And it's funny because now people take that as doctrine. They look at a lot of the stuff that's there and they go, this was all decided by the FDA, so it's got to be right. Okay.
As an immunologist, I certainly can speak to this. And also because when we're dealing with autologous cell therapy, meaning, oh my gosh, your immune cells versus my immune cells,
Right.
they're both activated by X. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yours might go up 5-fold. Mine might only go up 3-fold. That's just how we are. Does it make any difference? Does it actually matter in the response? And the answer is we have no idea. Like in
Yeah.
2025, we actually don't know. So yeah, right. I think that's a good way to put it. You need to set a marker where, look, if the freezer broke and everything died, you need a way to say, look, this is a bad product.
Uh,
Don't use it. But as far as like what those numbers should be to determine if it's going to work or not, yeah, we still don't really know. So we do, what everyone does is you pick the minimum, right? You don't need to make it harder on yourself. If the FDA says 30% is good enough, then that's where you set the bar.
yeah.
Why would you set it higher? And I don't mean to bash the guy. He's obviously a mainstream guy
No,
like
no,
that.
but that's what they got. That's what they got, and that's what they're because that's their area of their little area of expertise, and they're going to try to use it. But that's the other thing, though. This is where you're starting. You mentioned that you've got a world class group there in cell therapy that's developing this, and they're constantly looking at how to optimize this. And you have made several optimizations, in the time since you started this, and that's going to continue. So
Yep.
this product only gets better. That doesn't mean you wait for that product to get better because if somebody is in trouble now, you've got to use what you have. But
Mm-hmm.
it just shows you that you're not done yet, with how
Right.
you want to take this and where you want to go with it.
No, I do try and remind everyone of that. There's not a chance this is already optimized. How could it be? I mean, that would just scream so much arrogance to say, nope, it can't be any better than it is now. But that's very exciting because our baseline numbers, they're very impressive. And when I show this or to you or show the stats to other oncologists, they tend to all agree that there is definitely something legitimate here. And we just need to keep pushing it forward, get those numbers up, find and learn.
Yeah.
And so, kind of an exciting thing I like to tell a lot of the patients that end up coming to Immunocine is look, for any one person, it is about you. This is your life. You're working to do what you can to get your life back. But there is a bigger play here. The data we get is not just going to be this little, it's not going to be shoved in a wall in some back alley thing down in the middle of in Mexico. Like it all goes to a bigger picture of improving this and actually moving medicine forward. So you are, everyone that comes is actually a part of a much bigger push. And a lot of people, I think I would like that. A lot of people do like that. There's a bigger play here. You're a part of something, and even if it doesn't go phenomenally for you. You're a part of something, and you're helping others, and you're helping mankind. Not to be completely hyperbolic, but you are.
True.
And I don't know where it goes next, but I want Immunocine to continue to be the kind of company where we get Steve Nogas to work, look through everything, vet us, and buy in. And you already know we've got some other pretty impressive oncologists and doctors around the States and Canada, and well, Israel's come on actually in a big way,
Yeah.
and I know Europe. There's, and that's what I want. I know what the track record says about a lot of these offshore situations that do prey upon desperate patients, and we're just going to be different. And we're just going to be the group that you can trust. And so I appreciate you doing the rigor and the due diligence because you're part of that. And when we have 5 more of you, it just gets easier and easier to get 6 of you and 7 of you, and it does build on itself.
Well, I think people forget that a lot of the current medical discoveries and things that we do actually didn't come from the United States necessarily. They came from other countries. Australia, this is where growth factors like GCSF, Neupogen, Neulasta, this is where it came from. And Israel was working in cell therapy, a couple decades, 3 decades ago. I know people at the Weizmann Institute that have been doing work like this. So you got. I mean, there is more than just the U.S. in terms of science and and therapy, and I think the fact that we are in Mexico, we're going to actually add a lot to the Mexican star here, so to speak, in that people are going to see that good work can be coming out of a place like Mexico. And I think people forget also that some of the physicians in the United States that are in top positions, the world's leading neurosurgeon is from Mexico, and was trained in Mexico. Many of our oncologists have been trained in Mexico City. A lot of the residents in hospitals have been trained in Guadalajara. I think that's missing. People don't see that. And these people are in top positions in the US too. So I think what you're doing is showing the globalization of cell therapy in going forward. And that's very important.
Yep. No, it definitely is. I mean, cancer is not likely to go away anytime soon, and
No.
continues to be hard to treat. And I think you and I were discussing pretty recently a recent groundbreaking publication that came out regarding some movement in stage 4, colorectal cancer, and the data were less than awe-inspiring. I mean, we'll just say that we've gotten so used to, it is again, probably for a different platform, but we've become very risk averse in the country.
Yeah.
And we have become complacent with very small incremental changes mattering.
Right.
And, big, not to throw big pharma under the bus, but they're kind of classically known for taking a previously approved drug, slightly tweaking it. Maybe it moves the needle another 5%, and boom, new drug, new cocktail, new approval, new timeline, and their stock soars. It goes up billions of dollars because, hey, we can move the survival curve over to the right 5, 10%. Maybe you had 12 months and now we've got you to 14. Look at the amazing thing we did. And we consider that phenomenal. And not to poo poo how hard it is to move the needle in cancer, but my gosh, that's just not what we want to do. That's never was the focus of any of this research or this. Is no, we're looking for a huge chunk forward with this.
Well, I think you just brought up something that relates back to your release criteria statements, is that so the FDA has to have something to base how they approve a drug on. And it goes back to statistics. If you can statistically show in a trial that one arm of that trial is better than the other based on the statistics you put in there, that you're saying if it goes up 4% or something like this means it's a successful trial. Well, then they'll approve it. There was a big brouhaha a decade ago about a trial in pancreatic cancer with gemcitabine that added, it was approved, but it added 4 months to survival in patients with pancreatic cancer. 4 months. All right, that's nice, but really 4 months and about $50,000, $60,000, to cost. It's things like that. I mean, that's the way the system is set up. And you're right.
Yep.
You're going for much bigger things in that regard. So, yeah.
And here's my disclaimer is because we're talking a bit about it. We're actually, neither you or I are necessarily saying it is what it is. We're not denigrating the FDA or the existence or the importance of it. Here's the truth. If you take away that barrier to entry, I mean, there's no shortage of charlatans floating around that would be happy to sell
Absolutely.
you magical water for $50,000 and tell you it'll cure your cancer. If we take away that barrier, I can only imagine the hospitals will become full of salesmen who are peddling absolute crap. And they'll say, look, there's a video on YouTube, or someone said something on Facebook, and there will be no data to support that, no science to support that. And how will my mom, who's not an expert, how will she be able to discern? Not everyone has a Steve Noga in their corner. So how are the lay people going to know what's real, what's worth it, what's not? And so you have to have those, you have to have some regulation. You just do. Otherwise, it's just an even bigger mess than it is.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that, like I said, some of this we've done to ourselves because, people are kind of flawed and tend to take advantage of situations. So it is what it is. And certainly we're not trying to skirt the system. As you know, we're working as best we can with the system. It's just, we think that there's more than one pathway, and we hold ourselves to a very high standard. And if we can help some people, then that's what we're doing. That's what
I'm glad you said those last few statements, because getting back to the FDA, what I should mention is that about 95% of the applications that come from the FDA through the FDA, despite what I said about the 4 months, more than 95% are actually rejected. They actually don't meet the criteria. So that's just, so yes, the FDA is doing a good job. It's just so happens that the way the rules are built, you don't see these giant increments. It's very rare to see a giant increment done. And it brings me one more thing I want to say about, because we covered this morning with a patient, and it's about phase 1 trials. Phase 1 trials certainly offer a lot of hope. And we're talking mostly about drug trials now, not dendritic cell trials, which unfortunately most of these are phase 1 trials, except for now you have a phase 2, 3 coming in. But with these are drugs that they think are going to be game changers, they're going to work. But in a phase 1 trial, you're mainly looking for the safety of that drug. You're making sure that that drug doesn't have serious side effects. And believe me, a lot of drugs have been discontinued during a phase 1 trial because of that. Unexpected side effects they didn't see when they were giving it to rats or monkeys or whatever. But the dose of the drug in those phase 1 trials, in most cases, is maybe 10% of what they actually think is going to be the effective dose, because they want to make sure the drug is safe. Then they slowly bring that level of drug up to see whether it actually can have an effect or not, which means that, especially on a new drug, that they go, wow, you'll be the first person to try this drug in this phase 1 trial. And believe me, there's always exceptions, because we see 5%, maybe sometimes 10% of patients actually do respond to a phase one drug, but most don't. And you got to remember that, if the physician's holding out put you on a trial that goes, the next slot on this trial is going to be in 6 months. I think you'll make it till then. Well, maybe you won't. And so I think that's an important thing. That the Holy Grail is not a phase one trial.
No.
It may be useful. It may be beneficial. If there's nothing else and you want to do it, absolutely. I put many, many patients on phase one trials. I also know that usually phase one trials, the patients as individuals don't really respond. And this could be a serious thing, because if you're on a trial getting a drug that's really not affecting your cancer and you're not allowed because of the rules to be on anything else, well, in those 6 to 8 weeks before they reassess you, your cancer could have grown significantly. And I think that's important to bear in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as someone who obviously is tangentially involved with clinical trials and phase ones, I don't want to look, you need them to advance science, and I don't want to
Absolutely.
scare anyone. But the truth is, a phase one trial, when you enroll in one, you just need to be cognizant and aware that it's not about you at all as the patient. It's about the product or the technology being tested. We're testing different doses to see if there's a safety issue at some dose. We're trying to get far enough along that we can get our phase one finished, complete, and approved to move on to the next one. We're not even necessarily, as you pointed out, looking for efficacy at that juncture. And let's say you're the patient and you need more treatment, like you just said. Oh, well, you can't go do more treatment. That'll skew our data.
Yeah.
Or, it just have to be aware of that. Like you have now entered into a science experiment,
You're a
and
test subject. Yeah.
you are a test subject. And so you might say, oh, I read about histotripsy and that might be really helpful for me. And whereas if you were with them like us, where we are focused on the patient, we may say, yeah, that's a great addition.
Yeah.
Let's try and set it up, or let's talk to that doctor. Whereas if you're in a trial, yeah, you might be barred from doing that because, well, how are we going to know then if this treatment is actually working or if it's a
Exactly.
combination? And it's just a different mentality. And I completely agree with you. If it were me and there were just nothing else on the table, of course, you absolutely should take the chance on a phase one if you're in the position of what else, if there's just nothing else. But I don't like that. I don't like when I don't ever look. This as well as I do. Patients don't always do their due diligence. We're a big believers of due diligence. I just want people to know what they're signing up for. That's why, like, what we do is we have calls. We have so many calls with patients to answer their questions. Like, you should know who we are and what we're doing, and as best you can. You don't have to have a PhD, but you should have a decent idea of what this is. And I'll tell you, that is a huge red flag. If you're looking at any other clinic and you ask for them to explain some of the scientific merit behind what they're doing, and they poo-poo you and say, look, you're never going to understand it, or they say, no, we don't do that. I mean, like, that's poppycock. Like, no, that's hiding. I mean, good. We have a very high level scientific process here, and I have explained it successfully to thousands of lay people at this point. It is doable. You have to take the time to do it, but it is doable. And if anyone is truly excited by their science, they should be absolutely ready to address these questions.
So it brings to mind when the research nurse would hand me a stack of half a dozen consent forms for different trials and saying, in the next 2 hours, you're going to have 6 patients that you need to go through the trials and have them sign informed consent. And so the doctor is under the gun to get these done. So do you think when they go, could you explain this mechanism to me? They're going to avoid that like the plague.
Yep. Again, the system has some flaws,
Yeah.
and so maybe someday we will reshape the whole system. We can't do it all in one day, and we are making moves now. It's just going to take time.
You're adding personnel and you're adding manpower. I mean, I think this is important. You realize that your business has increased, but yet you want to give the same level of service, if not better. So I applaud what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Give it another year or two. We're gonna be we're gonna get pretty big here. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm somewhat blown away at the. I mean, when we started, we were so small, and now it's grown into quite a team. So anyway, so yeah, you are a wealth of experience and knowledge, and I always enjoy speaking with you. I definitely think we see eye to eye on many things, and honestly, I'm always happy when there's something maybe we don't, and then we can kick it around and debate. I always say this is not a problem with people not always agree. You don't want everyone to say the exact same thing. That's too much redundancy. You want
Yep.
different points out there, but you follow the science, you follow what I would almost wish were just basic tenets of human decency, and good things can happen. And we're seeing that. And I just, again, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. We're very grateful that you have done such due diligence and hard work, and that you now can speak faithfully to Immunocine and what we're doing and how we're helping patients. And always appreciate your help. And again, so as we wrap up here, I'm just going to, again, thank you for taking an hour out of your time to, meet with me. I get the impression that is not a fake background.
Nope, it is not.
No, I'm pretty sure I
Kona.
saw a ball or a frisbee fly by
Did you?
earlier. So
No, I hope not. I'm at
I,
1,000 feet in Kona,
I,
so if you saw a ball or Kona, somebody's really good.
I felt like I saw something back there, and I thought at that moment, oh, I don't think that's a fake background. So
No.
I'm a little envious of you, but maybe I'll come visit you.
Well,
Either some,
Cancun also is not so bad. So, let's
no,
talk about
Cancun is,
that for you.
yes,
Right.
that's true. A lot of the patients who come to us will say it's a cross between getting treatment and a vacation, because of course what we do is pretty much all outpatient, and it's not chemo. You're not bedridden
So,
or hooked up to a machine.
world-class restaurants. Yeah,
Yep.
nightlife we try to keep them away from, but yeah,
It is there.
yeah,
It is
it
there if
is
you want.
there.
But
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, so to everyone who stuck with us for the hour here, or and listened to all this, we always appreciate people taking time to educate themselves, to learn more. It's an unfortunate field to have to become an expert in. It's not ever going to be fun. It's cancer. That is what we're dealing with here, but it continues to evolve. Where it was 30 years ago is almost unrecognizable compared to where it is today. And I am legitimately excited about the future. I think with the advancements in personalization and targeting, and with the fact that there are smart people with rigor and gumption pushing things forward, I think we will eventually get to a point where cancer is not as severe a situation as it is right now, at least in a lot of cases, and we're getting there. So, and that is thanks to of course growing on the work that people like Dr. Noga have done, and Immunocine is going to keep pushing that needle forward. So. Thank you all for watching. Again, I'm Dr. Halpert with Immunocine. If you have any other questions or want to learn more about what we do, or things you could potentially do to combat cancer, a lot of information on our site, immunocine.com. And you can always contact us, and we're here to help. We're here to answer questions. We're here to help people get over cancer. Have a great day.
Pleasure being on with you, Matt. Really.